Imagine walking into a place where nothing matters. Not your fame, not your achievements, not your history. Every title, every recognition, every advantage you thought you had is gone. All that remains is presence. Presence and the choices you make in that very moment. Across the room, someone stands still. Not shouting. Not moving aggressively. Just standing. Observing. Yet the energy in the space subtly bends around them. People don't step forward. Conversations pause. Micro-gestures slow down. You feel it before you even realize what it is. Control without words. What happens when intimidation meets calm? When one person tests boundaries while the other simply holds space? How do you respond when tension is unspoken, yet undeniable? You might expect conflict. You might imagine a surge of anger, a display of dominance. But sometimes strength is silent. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one everyone subconsciously watches. Every movement here is measured. Every glance carries meaning. Even the smallest adjustment of posture can send signals louder than any shout. Eye contact becomes a conversation. Not the kind with words, but one with presence and attention. Breathing itself becomes a tool, slow, controlled, deliberate. Imagine yourself in this scenario. What would you do? Step forward, challenge the energy, break the tension? Or would you pause, reflect, and let composure guide your actions? It's easy to think this is about courage in the traditional sense, but it's not. It's about awareness, observation, discipline under subtle pressure. And here's the trick. Even without physical confrontation, the room reacts. People adjust around the space you occupy. Their confidence shifts. Their assumptions are challenged. And in that moment, something simple yet profound happens. The situation no longer dictates you. You dictate how it unfolds. This is the stage, the test, the silent conversation that few notice but everyone feels. And at the center of it stands a figure whose presence alone commands respect. Calm, focused, unshakable. Now that you're standing in this room, feeling the weight of unspoken tension, it's time to step back and understand what's really happening. This isn't about violence. It's not about who hits harder or moves faster. This is about psychological pressure, the subtle ways humans test boundaries when they are unsure of control. In high-stress environments, people naturally probe. They push limits, sometimes silently, sometimes through minor gestures or comments. It's rarely physical. Often it's just a glance, a posture, a subtle step closer. These small actions can make someone flinch, overreact, or lose focus. The environment itself becomes a test. And in that test, the stakes are awareness, composure, and timing. Now, imagine someone standing calmly in the midst of this pressure. Someone whose reputation precedes them only in whispers, and yet who doesn't rely on it. They don't need to announce their past or display credentials. Their presence alone changes the room. To ground this in something familiar, think about Keanu Reeves, a public figure known not just for his films, but for the discipline he brings to his work. For roles like John Wick, Reeves trained intensely, often under extreme physical and mental pressure, preparing to react flawlessly in every scenario. In interviews, he has spoken about focus, preparation, and consistency, the kinds of qualities that translate beyond acting into handling pressure calmly. Warning: important note. This is about training for roles, not about real-world combat expertise. That distinction keeps the story factual and monetization safe. We're exploring the psychological dynamics, not claiming a real fight occurred. In this scenario, the tension is subtle. One individual tests space while the other observes. There's a silent negotiation happening, not of words but of posture, breathing, and intent. Each step closer or backward is meaningful. Each glance or pause communicates far more than shouting ever could. Consider this. In environments where people are uncertain, even small cues can trigger reactions. Someone might shift weight, raise eyebrows, or subtly adjust stance. To the untrained eye, it might seem inconsequential. But in moments of psychological pressure, these minor actions can dominate perception. Awareness becomes power. Composure becomes influence. Here, the calm figure doesn't react with aggression. They don't escalate. Instead, they maintain their center. Breathing slow. Eyes steady. Movements deliberate. The tension remains, but it doesn't control them. Observers can't predict the next move, and that unpredictability gives a quiet authority. This is the heart of the story. How discipline, awareness, and emotional control create influence without confrontation. It's not about winning a fight. It's about holding space. It's about being unshakable in situations designed to unsettle. And for the audience watching, this raises the question: how do you handle your own pressure moments? How often do you react immediately versus observing, understanding, and choosing your response. The answers lie not in dramatic action but in silent resilience, the kind of strength that quietly shifts the balance of any room. By understanding this context, you see that the situation isn't about domination. It's about mastery, of yourself, of perception, and of subtle interaction. And as we move forward, this psychological tension will become even more apparent, showing how even in challenging circumstances, calm and awareness can quietly control the narrative. The room is quiet now, but it's not empty. Every movement, every breath is magnified. The tension isn't explosive, it's measured, deliberate, like a slow current under the surface of still water. One person tests the boundaries of the space, subtly shifting posture, adjusting distance, observing reactions. The other stands calmly, grounded, aware of every signal without being reactive. It begins with eye contact. Not the casual glance of acquaintances, but a sustained, deliberate observation. One pair of eyes seeks to provoke, to gauge confidence. The other pair responds with measured attention, holding focus without a flicker of impatience or aggression. Here, power doesn't come from volume. It comes from presence. Body language becomes the language of this interaction. A slight lean forward. A hand resting loosely at the side. A subtle turn of the shoulder. Each gesture communicates intent without words. The person testing the space might think they are dictating the interaction, but the calm individual reads the cues and adjusts effortlessly, never letting tension escalate. Distance is another factor. Proximity is power. Moving closer can be a test, stepping back can be a challenge. But the calm individual doesn't react impulsively. They control the flow of space with precise awareness. One step forward, one step back. Subtle adjustments that shift balance without confrontation. It's a silent negotiation where the outcome is determined by composure, not force. Breathing becomes a tool. In high-pressure moments, people often tighten, quicken their breath, betray nervousness. The calm individual, however, controls each inhale and exhale. Slow, steady, intentional. It sends signals, to observers and to the person testing boundaries, that they are in control, that they are unshakable. Micro-expressions carry weight. A raised eyebrow. A tiny shift in focus. A slight nod or pause. To someone untrained, these might seem meaningless. But in this environment, they communicate awareness, patience, and control. Every subtle cue is noticed, consciously or unconsciously, and the room begins to react accordingly. People unconsciously adjust, even if they don't realize why. It's in these moments that the tension grows, not because someone is acting violently, but because perception and awareness are in constant dialogue. One person believes they are testing the situation. The other is shaping it silently. It's a mental chess game played in gestures, glances, and posture. And it's fascinating to consider the mental aspect. The individual under observation can feel pressure mounting without any physical threat. Thoughts race. Am I too aggressive? Too passive? Am I being read? Meanwhile, the calm individual remains aware of these micro-reactions, managing both their own presence and the perceived intentions of others. In scenarios like this, the strongest responses are subtle. They are almost imperceptible, yet they shift the environment profoundly. A tilt of the head, a pause, a measured step. These are the moments where influence becomes clear. The person testing the space might not realize that, without force, they are already being guided by someone who refuses to react impulsively. This is the essence of rising tension. Psychology over physicality, awareness over aggression, and calm presence over reactive force. It's about mastering the environment without ever raising a hand. Every second stretches the mind, every subtle cue becomes a tool, and every reaction reveals character. By the end of this phase, you realize that confrontation isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's calculated. And it's in that quiet, in that calculation, that true authority emerges. The room is aware. The tension is palpable. And the calm figure remains the anchor. After the long minutes of silent assessment, the atmosphere in the room begins to change. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. There is no explosive confrontation, no raised voices, no sudden movement that draws attention. Instead, there is a subtle adjustment, almost imperceptible, that begins to shift the balance of the space. The calm individual, who has held composure through every probing glance and micro-gesture, makes a small, deliberate movement. Perhaps it is a slight tilt of the body, a soft step to the side, a shift in stance that redistributes weight evenly. Nothing that would appear confrontational to anyone watching, but everything to the person testing the boundaries. This is the moment where awareness becomes influence. In high-stress interactions, timing is everything. The person under subtle pressure often expects reaction, expects tension to escalate. But when there is none, when responses are measured, minimal, and intentional, the dynamics begin to change. The person testing space feels uncertainty creeping in. Micro-reactions appear, a hesitation in step, a pause in gesture, a slight retraction in posture. They are beginning to realize that the other individual is not reacting impulsively, the control has shifted. It is in this calm yet precise execution that authority is established. Eye contact remains steady, but it is no longer a test. It is an acknowledgement. The subtle cues the tester has been sending now meet clarity rather than challenge. The room itself seems to relax, not because tension disappears, but because it has been guided by someone who understands the invisible rules of interaction. Distance too is adjusted with care. The calm individual does not invade space aggressively. Instead, they create a rhythm that naturally sets boundaries. One step forward, one step back. A flow that communicates, this is the space I occupy and it will not be violated. It is a reset, not a strike. A redirection, not a confrontation. Breathing continues to play its role. Each inhale and exhale is controlled, almost meditative. It sends a signal to both the tester and the observers that the situation is under control, that escalation is unnecessary. It is astonishing how much power there is in something as simple as maintaining calm under pressure. Subtle shifts in body language now reinforce the effect. A slight straightening of the back, a gentle lifting of the head, a relaxed yet confident positioning of the hands. These are not actions designed to dominate, they are actions that communicate awareness and self-control. Emotional control becomes the tool through which authority is exercised, quietly but unmistakably. What happens next is remarkable. The individual who initially sought to challenge begins to unconsciously mirror calm, reducing tension without consciously realizing it. The subtle adjustments, timing, and awareness have reshaped the interaction entirely. Without a word, without aggression, the balance of power has shifted. The environment is now guided by composure rather than impulse. This is the essence of the shift. Influence without force, clarity without confrontation, and awareness without spectacle. It demonstrates that real strength lies not in overwhelming others, but in understanding situations, reading cues, and adjusting actions with intention. The room no longer dictates behavior, the calm individual shapes it. And for anyone observing, the lesson is profound. Power is not always the loudest voice or the most aggressive gesture. Sometimes, the strongest presence is one that quietly and deliberately controls the flow of events, setting the tone through awareness, emotional regulation, and measured action. In this moment, the subtle shift has completed. The tension that once seemed poised to escalate now flows naturally into equilibrium. There is no need for spectacle, no need for force. The individual who tested boundaries has been guided, not defeated. And the calm figure remains unshaken, fully aware, and quietly authoritative. As the interaction unfolds in the room, it might seem straightforward to an observer. One person stands calm, composed, and in control, while the other tests boundaries, hesitates, and ultimately adjusts. But outside of this space, especially online, the narrative rarely remains that subtle. Social media thrives on drama, on quick judgments, on who won debates. People are eager to label, to assign victory and defeat, often without seeing the nuance that really matters. If this scene were posted online, the comments would start almost immediately. Who won? He just let him walk all over him. Why didn't he hit back? These questions miss the essence entirely. They assume that confrontation is measured by visible action, by the loudness of aggression, by the spectacle of dominance. But real control is rarely loud. It's quiet, deliberate, and subtle, exactly what this room has been witnessing. Online viewers, accustomed to hyperbolic content and instant gratification, might be frustrated by a lack of physical spectacle. They want conflict. They want drama. And yet, the most interesting aspect of this interaction is precisely what can't be captured in a GIF or a clip. It's the mental negotiation, the subtle shifts, the awareness that allows someone to shape the dynamics of a room without raising a hand. Here's the point often lost in misinterpretation. The calm individual doesn't win in the traditional sense. They don't triumph through force or dominance. Their influence emerges through restraint, observation, and timing. In fact, if we frame it as a battle, they appear almost passive. Yet in reality, they are orchestrating the outcome with precision that goes unnoticed by casual viewers. The paradox is fascinating. On the internet, viewers often equate action with success. But here, success is silent. Influence is unspoken. Authority is measured not by what is done, but by what is withheld. The room itself responds to the calm presence. Movements adjust, posture changes, hesitation appears. This is the invisible victory that doesn't translate easily to online commentary. For UK audiences, this meta-commentary resonates because it encourages reflection. It asks, when faced with pressure, do you measure strength by outward display or by internal mastery? How often do we misinterpret calmness as weakness, when in fact it is deliberate, strategic, and ultimately powerful? This distinction is crucial for retention, as it shifts the story from spectacle to insight, engaging viewers on a psychological and reflective level. Let's consider the online angle further. People might discuss the moment with excitement, exaggerating imagined details. He could have ended it in seconds. Why didn't he just step forward? He looked scared for a moment. These reactions reveal more about assumptions and biases than about the situation itself. Observers project their expectations of action onto a scenario that isn't about brute force at all. By introducing this commentary, we create a dual layer for the audience. First, there's the narrative of subtle tension, careful awareness, and quiet influence. Second, there's the reflection on perception, showing how easily nuance is lost when filtered through the lens of instant judgment. This meta layer keeps viewers engaged because it invites them to think, to question, to see beyond the obvious. It also enhances retention strategically. Pausing to address what people online would say creates a small pattern interrupt. It slows the pacing just enough to make viewers think, wait, maybe I've been missing something. This makes the narrative feel participatory rather than passive. The audience isn't just watching, they're processing, reflecting, and evaluating alongside the story. The most compelling insight is that the calm individual's true influence isn't for public validation. It doesn't require witnesses or applause. Real control is independent of recognition. And this is where online misinterpretation becomes part of the story itself. While some focus on who won or what happened, the real lesson is internal. Discipline, awareness, and emotional mastery are far more significant than public opinion. Finally, for UK viewers, this reflection taps into values of subtlety, composure, and intelligence. It contrasts sharply with the over-the-top dramatization common on social media. By emphasizing quiet strategy over spectacle, it encourages thoughtful engagement, invites discussion, and deepens connection with the narrative. The audience begins to see strength differently, not as loud, not as reactive, but as measured, aware, and deliberate. In essence, the internet misinterpretation angle turns the story into a conversation about perception itself. It shows how easily nuance is lost, why calm can be mistaken for weakness, and how discipline and awareness can quietly influence outcomes far beyond the immediate situation. It reframes the narrative, making it reflective, psychologically engaging, and highly shareable. Online, people will argue about winners and losers. In reality, the lesson isn't in confrontation. It's in composure, timing, and mastery of presence. After the tension has shifted and the subtle influence has taken hold, it's time to reflect. Not on who won, not on who seems stronger in the eyes of casual observers, and certainly not on any imagined spectacle. The real lesson lies beneath the surface, in the quiet mastery that often goes unnoticed. Think about strength for a moment. In most narratives, films, social media clips, even everyday conversations, strength is loud. It is visible, demonstrative, assertive. It demands attention. But real strength, the kind that shapes situations without force or aggression, is different. It is quiet, controlled, measured, and it doesn't seek validation from anyone outside the self. Consider the individual at the center of this scenario, calm, present, deliberate. Their focus is not on outward recognition or the reactions of others. It is on awareness, on understanding the dynamics of the room, on regulating their own presence and energy to influence without confrontation. Every subtle adjustment, every measured breath, every deliberate microgesture contributes to a silent authority that is far more impactful than any aggressive action could be. In life, as in this scenario, moments of pressure are rarely dramatic. They are subtle. They are brief. And they test not only skill but patience, composure, and clarity of thought. The person who thrives under such circumstances doesn't overreact. They observe. They assess. They respond deliberately rather than impulsively. This is what allows influence to grow organically, without spectacle, without force. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own experiences. When was the last time you were under pressure and allowed your composure to guide your actions? When did you take a step back rather than reacting immediately? The lessons from this scenario extend far beyond the room. They are lessons about life, leadership, and self-discipline. Notice how timing matters. A slight pause before responding can reveal more strength than instant reaction. Awareness of small details, posture, tone, spacing, microexpressions, can shift outcomes subtly but profoundly. Breathing, emotional control, and the ability to regulate internal tension are tools that almost nobody acknowledges, yet they are often the most powerful. This is the paradox of quiet mastery. It appears simple, almost invisible to the casual observer, yet it requires extraordinary discipline. There is no external reward for subtlety. There are no cheers, no applause, no visible markers of dominance. But the impact is real. It changes the dynamic, shapes behavior, and establishes authority in ways that dramatic action never could. For the audience, this is where reflection deepens retention. UK viewers in particular respond to this slow, thoughtful pacing. Short sentences, pauses, a calm voiceover, moments of silence. These elements give space for the audience to internalize the lesson and connect it to their own life. Every pause is a chance for reflection. What would I do in that situation? How do I handle tension in my own life? And here's the critical insight. Confidence doesn't need to be aggressive. Strength doesn't need to be loud. Discipline doesn't need witnesses. True influence grows quietly from consistent presence, measured awareness, and emotional control. It thrives on subtlety and clarity rather than spectacle. Let's consider the wider implications. In workplaces, social situations, and even online interactions, the people who maintain calm under pressure often shape outcomes more effectively than those who react impulsively. Authority is recognized not because it is asserted, but because it is felt. People respond instinctively to composure, even if they don't consciously acknowledge it. The room, the environment, and even the perceptions of others are all subtly guided by those who master themselves. And that is the essence of the real lesson. Influence is not about winning a visible battle. It's about mastering presence, shaping outcomes without conflict, and remaining unshakable in situations designed to unsettle. In life, as in this scenario, the strongest person in the room may never be noticed by those seeking drama. They don't need applause, headlines, or validation. Their power is quiet, deliberate, and enduring. And while many may misinterpret calm for weakness, those who understand it know the truth. Strength is measured by restraint, awareness, and mastery of self. Pause. Breathe. Reflect. Strength isn't always obvious. But when it is applied wisely, subtly, and consistently, its impact is undeniable. Strength is quiet. Confidence is deliberate. Mastery is internal. This is the real lesson, one that carries far beyond any single moment, beyond any room, and into the way we navigate the pressures of everyday life. By the time the scenario comes to a close, it's clear that this story isn't about action or spectacle. It's about subtle influence, awareness, and the kind of discipline that doesn't need to be broadcast. Yet, in an age dominated by social media and instant judgment, the moment would likely be misinterpreted. Online, viewers would immediately ask, who won? Why didn't he act? Was that all just hesitation? And this is precisely where the story becomes more than just a narrative, it becomes a lesson about perception itself. The strongest person in a room isn't always the one who dominates the visible conversation, who raises their voice, or who asserts themselves aggressively. Sometimes, the strongest presence is the one who doesn't need to do any of that. The one who shapes the environment quietly, deliberately, and without spectacle. Pause and consider that for a moment. How often do we equate visibility with effectiveness? How often do we measure strength by what is immediately noticeable rather than what is enduring? In this scenario, authority and influence were earned through patience, awareness, and emotional mastery. Not by volume. Not by aggression. Not by winning in the traditional sense. And yet, the impact was undeniable. Even if someone online claimed the calm individual did nothing, the truth is far more profound. They were, in fact, guiding the room. Each step, each pause, each deliberate breath communicated boundaries, set the pace, and created equilibrium. In subtle ways, every observer, both the one testing space and everyone else in the environment, adjusted unconsciously. That is quiet power. That is the kind of mastery that doesn't require applause or external validation. And this is the point where reflection becomes critical. Pause for a moment and think about your own life. How often have you felt pressured, tested, or underestimated? How often did you feel that the expectation was to react immediately, to assert dominance, to win by the visible standard? And yet, how many times might a quieter, more measured response have created far better outcomes? The essence of this story is not confrontation. It's not about proving superiority in a single moment. It's about cultivating influence that endures, that shapes environments subtly, and that maintains control without aggression. The calm individual didn't need witnesses. They didn't need recognition. Their strength was internal. Their presence, deliberate and consistent, communicated authority far more effectively than a visible display of force ever could. For UK audiences, this reflective approach resonates deeply. We appreciate stories that allow space for thought, that slow the pacing just enough for contemplation, and that emphasize psychological depth over exaggerated action. The pauses, the subtle narrative cues, the micro-reflections, all of these keep viewers engaged, prompting them to connect the story to their own experiences. This is why the story is shareable not because of drama but because of insight. Consider the broader lesson. Life is full of subtle pressures. Workplaces, social interactions, even online forums often test patience and composure. People expect immediate reactions, and it's easy to misread silence as indecision. But true mastery is quiet. It's aware. It adapts. It shapes outcomes without the need for spectacle. This is a lesson that transcends this specific scenario. It is universally applicable, a reminder that the most powerful presence is often unseen, measured, and deliberate. The final reflection is simple, yet profound. Maybe the strongest person in the room isn't the one who wins in the visible sense. Maybe it's the one who doesn't need to win at all. Not because they are indifferent, but because they have mastered themselves to the extent that external chaos cannot unsettle them. Their strength is internal, and their influence is quiet yet undeniable. And that is the takeaway we want viewers to carry with them. Not a story about confrontation. Not a story about spectacle. A story about presence. About awareness. About emotional control. About understanding that real strength is subtle, deliberate, and enduring. Pause. Reflect. Think about your own life. When was the last time you acted without needing to prove anything? When did your calm and awareness create influence without recognition? That is where true mastery lies. That is where quiet power emerges. That is where resilience is cultivated, day by day, moment by moment. If this perspective changed how you see strength, you already understand the lesson. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be witnessed. And it doesn't need validation. Influence is quiet. Strength is internal. Mastery is deliberate. So, the next time you find yourself in a situation where others expect reaction, aggression, or drama, remember this story. Remember that calm, awareness, and subtlety are powerful tools. Remember that real strength is not in visible conquest, but in the quiet authority that shapes the room without a single raised hand. And that, ultimately, is why this story resonates, why it's shareable, and why it endures. Not because of what was done, but because of what was understood, felt, and controlled, silently, deliberately, and profoundly. Strength is quiet. Mastery is deliberate. Influence is internal. Reflect on that. Let it guide your next moment of pressure. Let it remind you that the strongest person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove anything at all.